I've said it about 14 different ways. The program has special meaning for me today. I graduated from high school with her grandma, Carol, and our families have been friends ever since. And I want you to meet some of Kristie's family. Her mom, Kim, and Michael's mom, Rosemary. And will you please stand? And also, Kristie's dad is here. He keeps popping in. There he is over there. Rodney, he's the camera operator for Kristie. And also, there are many of Kristie's and Michael's family and friends are here to do what they have been doing for Kristie and Michael. They love them, they have supported them, and said many prayers for them. And would Kristie's family and friends please stand? Over there. There's a table full. And I don't know if there's any others in the audience. Kristie has a special message today that she will be sharing with us. And as I look around the room, I think each and every one of you could be standing on this stage telling your story. We have been blessed that we too have had those who love us and have supported us with prayer as we have done the same for others. This is our last luncheon for 2023. I want to thank each and every one from Bethlehem who have been responsible for the preparation of all the times together each week. But I have to admit, it's really been fun. We have only worked with the kindest and funnest people. It's really been a good time. So Bethlehem Lutheran Church has a motto on our front lawn. Are all welcome. All are welcome. We appreciate your attendance. And Kristie, I now turn the microphone over to you so you can tell your family story.
Look right at my speech because otherwise I'm already on the verge of tears. So, no eye contact, sorry. Okay. Exactly 2 years ago to the day and nearly the hour, I was being airlifted to Sioux Falls. I was in extremely preterm labor and absolutely scared out of my mind. To understand why I was so afraid, I'll first have to tell you a little more about my journey to motherhood and what led up to this point. Prior to this pregnancy, I had 2 miscarriages. I had the anxiety from that to all-day morning sickness, several weeks of bleeding throughout the pregnancy, and some abnormal screening results. It didn't make for an easy pregnancy by any means. Thankfully, all our ultrasounds continued to check out, and I was growing a perfectly healthy little peanut. At one point, I actually told my mother-in-law, I will sigh the biggest sigh of relief when we get to viability, which is considered to be 24 weeks, the point that babies are considered to be able to survive outside the womb. I was working night shifts as a labor and delivery nurse at a Vera during this time. On the day I reached the 23rd week of my pregnancy, I was working a night shift, but it wasn't a busy shift by any means. I started to feel random cramps, and I just couldn't get comfortable in my chair. I tried to time them to see if they were contractions, but there was no regular pattern whatsoever, so I just figured it was stretching of all the ligaments. Even as a labor and delivery nurse, I never thought it could be labor because I was only 23 weeks. To this day, I still regret not hooking myself up to a monitor because I was literally working in the place that people go to get checked out for things like this. My shift ended, and on the drive home, the song, Truth I'm Standing On by Leona Crawford played on the radio. The lyrics go, right now I'm choosing to believe that someday soon I'll look back and see all the pain had a purpose, your plan was perfect all along. This is the truth I'm standing on. I believe you're still good, even when life's not good. I will not lose this hope. That the God who parts the sea promises he's going to make a way for me. I so vividly remember praising him during this moment for giving us this healthy baby after the first 2 miscarriages we had. I had no idea these lyrics would become my mantra over the next few months. I woke up mid-morning by my dog jumping on my bed when my husband Michael got home from a fishing trip. I realized the cramps were now in a very regular pattern. I shakily grabbed a pen and notepad and wrote down what I needed to say when I called the OB on call, a habit garnered from being a labor and delivery nurse. I don't think she thought I was really in labor, and I could practically hear the smile in her voice when she told me to meet her at the hospital. I met my husband Michael in the kitchen and hugged him as I started to cry. I said, "I'm scared." He replied, "I know, I am too," and off we went. We got to the hospital and my friends, the OB nurses, checked me into triage. I got into a gown and they put monitors on me and the baby. Thankfully, little Peanut was totally oblivious and she looked great. The doctor came into triage, put the speculum in to do the exam and look at my cervix. She immediately commanded, "Get her on her head and call Sioux Falls now." The nurses started scrambling. Even though the rational side of my brain knew exactly what this meant, tilting woman's head down and feet up on the bed can help relieve pressure off the cervix to hopefully prevent further dilation. I held on to a thread of hope that this wasn't happening. She told me my cervix was dilated to 4 centimeters and 10 is fully dilated. At this point, I became an observer to the entire situation. All I remember screaming is, "No, no, 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 God, please, no, not again." I thought I was losing our third baby, but this time it was after. After I had been reassured time and time again with all the ultrasounds and feeling her kicks, I looked at Michael and said, "I'm so sorry." The nurses flew into action. I got my first dose of steroids to help mature the baby's lungs, the shot to try to calm the uterus, and I was eventually started on IV magnesium in an attempt to stop the labor. The flight team from Sioux Falls was called. While we waited for them to arrive, I just kept praying that they would accept me for this flight once they arrived, because sometimes if you're too far dilated, they won't take you because of the high-risk possibility of delivering in flight. Thankfully, the flight team arrived and I was good to go. We sent Michael off to drive to Sioux Falls and meet us there. When I arrived in Sioux Falls, my cervix was rechecked and I was only 1 centimeter dilated now. Cervixes shouldn't go back in dilation, but apparently mine did. This drastically changed the conversation about the baby's survival and plan of care. Delivery was still pretty imminent, but not as imminent, and we bought ourselves some much-needed time. Once we were settled in, we texted our family her name so that they could use it in their prayers. We had decided on a name for the baby weeks before, but we hadn't shared it with anyone yet. The name we had chosen was Ava, which means to fly or to live, both of which became very fitting for our girl. She was either going to spread her wings and soar, or she would gain her wings and fly to heaven. Later, after Ava was born, prayer chains around the nation were formed for her almost instantly. We are still so grateful to this day for the hundreds of people who included her in their prayers. I've met complete strangers that, after I tell them about my daughter, I can see the light bulb go off in their head and they tell me they've prayed for this little girl. If I learned one thing for this entire experience, it's to never doubt the power of prayer. I spent the next 3 days lying in bed, still with my head tilted down, not getting up once. I was still on magnesium, which made my vision blurry, my mind fuzzy, and my cheeks flushed. Labor was slowed, but it never fully stopped. I got another dose of steroids to mature Ava's lungs, and I remained on IV magnesium to protect her brain. I had many ultrasounds done to check Ava's growth and position. Each day, the NICU team of neonatologists and nurse practitioners came to see us. I wouldn't wish the conversations we had to have upon anyone. The conversations were far from positive. I was just over 23 weeks pregnant at this point, and any hour longer I could stay pregnant provided for a more positive outcome for Ava. They gave us a paper that listed all the odds. Most importantly, a 50% chance of survival, and that was just survival, much less survival without a major disability. They asked if I were to deliver right now, what would we want to do? Would we want to attempt resuscitation or do comfort care and hold her for her first and last breaths? At 23 weeks, the decision is left up to the parents. The decision seems obvious, right? Before this, I always thought I'd want everything done to save my child. But what if she was whisked away to a cold room, surrounded by strangers, being poked and prodded for her very first and last breaths, only to die without us, her parents, nearby? Wouldn't you wish you had spent those moments cuddling her, whispering to her how much you love her, and getting to say a peaceful goodbye? Ultimately, we decided that we needed to give Ava her own choice. If she wanted to fight and she had the strength to do so, she deserved that chance. And we would be standing right by her side, fighting alongside her. I held on to the thought that no matter what happens, no matter the outcome of what her life would look like, she will always know love and bring joy. On the afternoon of the 30th, I started to sense something was wrong. My contractions started to get stronger and closer together. While my sister led a prayer group over Skype, I lay in my bed listening to their words and praying for me to stay pregnant, sadly knowing Ava was on her way. We called the nurse in around 7 p.m. who put the contraction monitor on my belly. My uterus was still pretty small at this point, so we weren't even seeing any contractions. The OB on call did come and check my cervix though, and it had dilated to a real 4. This meant I was officially in true labor, and we had no choice but to let it ride, due to the risk of infection. By 10 p.m., I was in full-blown labor, a ton of pain, and total denial. I completely disassociated from everything. Michael had to force me to look at it as he told me, I know this isn't what we wanted to happen, but it's happening, and we need to accept that. I just shook my head no over and over, staring blank-eyed across the room, while he kept trying to talk to me. Eventually, I snapped out of it around 11 p.m. and I got an epidural. Once that was placed, the OB checked me again, and I was 8 centimeters dilated. A few minutes later, 10 centimeters. Thankfully, the amniotic sac was still intact, giving us time to call for the NICU team. I panicked, thinking the NICU team would never get there in time. The NICU team arrived within minutes, and finally my OB broke the amniotic sac. While what felt like 12 people, no, seriously, stood in my room awaiting the delivery of this extremely premature baby. I pushed 3 times, and our spunky little girl, weighing 1 pound and 6 ounces, was born at 12:50 a.m. Ava had made it into a new day. She was born at 23 weeks and 4 days. I pray every day that I will always remember the moment she was born. She was relatively spunky for a 23-weeker. When she came out, she was moving her arms and legs and gasping to breathe. While she was still getting blood through her cord from my placenta, we were able to do 60 seconds of skin to skin. I told her over and over again that she needs to be strong now and that Mommy loves her. Once those 60 seconds were up, a nurse took her and ran to the golden hour room, where they performed resuscitation to save her life. Probably an hour after delivery, the neonatologist came to let us know that Ava was doing well. She was alive. She had been born a good size for her gestation, and she was easily intubated to help her breathe. She would soon be transferred to room 4612 in the NICU. Months later, I would see new babies get admitted to the NICU, and every time there's an adrenaline rush in the air and a massive crowd around the room. I've always wondered what it must have been like when Ava got brought up on the first night. I can only imagine the nerves that a fresh 23-weeker would bring to the unit. We were then thrown into a whole new world that no one and nothing could prepare me for. With my background as a nurse in labor and delivery and some lower acuity NICU, I knew just enough to understand the terms and know some of what was going on, but not enough to calm the growing feeling of terror in my gut. The neonatologist helped us to understand goals for the first few hours and days. They would do a head ultrasound in a few days to assess for a head bleed. Ava was on a ventilator called an oscillator that pants like a dog rather than gives full breaths like we take to try to protect her lungs. She would get her nutrition through an IV for a while. Her room was doused in blue light due to jaundice. We needed to limit any sort of stimulation in the room. Loud noises, bright lights, touch. At this gestation, Ava couldn't differentiate between loving and painful touches. Everything to her was painful. I couldn't even touch my daughter without causing her pain and overstimulation. I wouldn't be able to rock while holding her for months because of the painful stimulation that would cause her brain. They did let us take our first family photo that night with me holding her tiny, tiny foot. I could completely hold her foot in between my pointer finger and thumb. When I put my hand down next to her body, she was the size of my hand, from the tip of my middle finger to the base of my palm. I was discharged 2 days later, and while leaving without Ava was nearly unbearable, I moved into the Ronald McDonald House across the street. I only ever left twice for overnight stays in Aberdeen. Due to COVID rules, we couldn't have any visitors in the Ronald McDonald House, so our moms brought my bags to the door for me to help me move in. While Michael made a trip to Aberdeen to grab his work computer, our moms walked with me to the hospital so that I would know how to get from place to place. We also weren't allowed to have visitors in the NICU besides Michael and I for many months of our stay. Michael spent most of his time in Aberdeen due to needing to work, but he would come visit on most weekends or if Ava ever got really sick. It was just me and Ava girl, together through it all, day after day. We fell into a routine. Every day that I could, I'd spend at least 3 hours in the afternoon doing skin to skin while reading her a book. Some days, if she was unstable and having a rough day or she was getting a blood transfusion, I couldn't hold her, which made our cuddles all the more precious when we could have them. As she got older and could handle more stimulation, I could pick her up whenever I wanted. I would literally hold her all day long to make up for lost time. The skin to skin was so healing for both of us. The NICU staff always told me that it quite literally saved her life. We were told that the NICU is like a roller coaster of ups and downs, with a honeymoon phase in the beginning where everything goes great, but then the other shoe drops and it all takes a turn for the worse. Honestly, I think Ava stayed in the honeymoon phase for the majority of her NICU stay. She was only intubated with a breathing tube for 10 days, which is nearly unheard of for a 23-weeker, when most stay intubated for weeks or months. Her main issue during her NICU stay was her kidneys wouldn't work, and she completely stopped peeing for several intense days. That eventually got figured out with the help of heavy steroids and consults with specialists from other hospitals. She also came down with a regular cold near term age, and within the span of 6 hours, she went from hardly needing any respiratory support to almost being intubated again. It took her several months to learn how to eat and breathe at the same time, without dropping her heart rate and oxygen level, causing alarms to blare off and staff to come running. Some days, when I tried to hold her, she couldn't tolerate the stimulation and had to be taken from me to be put back in her bed. There are many moments of darkness, but with the darkness came a lot of light. That light casts a glow of joy and peace over the entire experience that makes looking back a lot less scary. While writing this speech, I was talking to a good friend who I met because she also had a 23-weeker born a few weeks after Ava. I told her, I'm not sure what I'm going to say. I mean, Ava was only intubated for 10 days and never needed any surgeries. It wasn't that interesting. She wasted no time in telling me, to you, it might be uninteresting and uncomplicated, but to any other mom, their child spending even one day on a ventilator is something they talk about at their graduation ceremony. I did face the harsh reality of NICU life a few times. I always use the back elevator to get to the NICU. This time, I rode up with a man in a black suit carrying a small box. As I followed him to the NICU unit, I wondered why he would be carrying a box like that. Then I realized what this man was here for. He would be taking God's newest angel out in that box. Death in the NICU makes the air hang heavy, which is how it felt on this day. I quickened my pace to Ava's room and cried by her isolette, while I said prayer after prayer over her. The walls of her NICU room have probably heard more prayers than the walls of any church. Another time, I was leaving late after Ava had a tough day. In the hallway outside the NICU, I found a mom sobbing by herself on the floor. I stopped and asked if she's all right. She told me her baby will probably die tomorrow. We hugged, talked, and then went our separate ways, me to the Ronald McDonald House to rest, her back to her daughter's NICU room to spend their last hours together. The next day, I saw the entire family crowded in the NICU room as God gained another tiny, sweet angel. Aside from moments like that, when I think back on our NICU stay, I have mostly fond memories thanks to the staff, who I miss and appreciate more than I can put into words. They were there for me through the absolute worst moments of my life, and truly became my friends, since I was in Ava's room by myself most nights. Once a nurse found me in the corner and comforted me while I watched in horror, while two other nurses forced Ava to breathe with a bag because she had stopped breathing. That's a sight that is forever burned into my brain as a mother. Another time, a nurse made sure I got the help I needed when I was curled up in a ball sobbing with mastitis, afraid that if I left to see a doctor, I wouldn't be allowed back in because of COVID rules and having a fever due to the mastitis. A nurse once hugged me as I cried in the middle of the hallway, and helped me pick up the pieces and become the best advocate I could be for Ava. The NICU staff would move heaven and earth for their patients and families, and I am forever grateful to them. They loved and cared for Ava like she was their own. After 146 very, very long days, we finally were able to bring our Ava girl home. She came home on full-time oxygen, but as a nurse, this was more than manageable. I put her travel oxygen tank in a backpack, and off we'd go every day for a walk. Every day while in the NICU, I looked out the window and prayed that someday Ava would get to feel the sun on her face or a gentle breeze blow across her skin. I was determined to get out and experience the world with her. After being stuck indoors for 5 months, eventually she was weaned down to only needing oxygen with sleep. Then, at 11 and a half months old, her lungs had grown strong enough that she didn't need oxygen at all. And I was able to put her down to sleep for the very first time without a single cord or wire attached to her. She still sees several specialist doctors, but she has slowly started to graduate from regularly scheduled visits with them. Her lungs still have some damage, but luckily, human lungs grow until 7 years of age. So, while she may just never be a long-distance runner, we're hoping her lungs will heal themselves nearly completely eventually. Her heart still has a tiny hole in it, but it's not large enough to cause any issues. Her eyes had some damage that's common with preemies, but they healed themselves and she now has perfect vision. It took her a very long time to gain weight, but she's now started to take off. So, while she's still small for her age, she's at least on the growth charts. She works with physical therapy out of an abundance of caution, but she's completely on track with her physical milestones, and even ahead in some. She's slightly behind in speech, but she progresses every day with the help of a wonderful team of speech therapists. And she's scheduled to get tubes placed in her ears next week due to fluid in her ears muffling her hearing, which should also help quite a bit. Most people don't understand that the way this turned out for us is not the way it's supposed to work out for a baby born before the age of viability. Every single night since the first day she was born, I have prayed the exact same prayer, pleading that she will have the strength to do just basic bodily functions. May she eat well, keep well, poop well, breathe well, do all the things she needs to grow. There were moments that doing the bare minimum to survive seemed impossible for Ava. From the beginning, she was born fighting, and it didn't seem fair that she needed to go through all this. I once cried to my mom, I wish I could take all the pain from her and do it myself. My mom paused and said through teary eyes, that feeling never really goes away. As a mom, all you want is to protect your child from harm and for them to live a normal, healthy life. So far, I have succeeded in neither of those things. Ava has had to be stronger in her first 2 years of life than most of us have ever needed to be in our entire lives. And as far as normal goes, I don't think the fact that she's only alive and breathing due to a literal miracle and a couple $1 million NICU stay counts. Even though I haven't succeeded in those two things, I know I have succeeded in these two, which has always been my wish from the very start. May Ava always know love and bring joy. She's determined, brave, and strong, and I praise God every day that I was chosen to raise a feisty miracle named Ava. And Ava shy. She's not around many people because we've tried to keep her safe from germs and stuff, but she's probably just a little in shock. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kristie and Mike and Ava, very much. We will continue praying for you.